Red ink. For most of us, it's just a color. But for Leo, a 12-year-old boy, it is the color of failure, the color of judgment, the color of heavy, disappointed sighs. He is drowning in an ocean of red, and every failing grade is another crashing wave, pulling him deeper to a place where the air runs out and light cannot reach. And the man standing on the shore, watching him struggle, is none other than his father, Sterling Vance, a king of the modern world, a billionaire, whose empire was built on steel contracts and skyscrapers. He looks down at his son's test paper, the only weapon this boy has, and utters a single word, sharp as shattered glass: useless. His decision is made. Leo will be sent away, to a boarding school far from home, an island of exile for expensive disappointments. No tutor could help. No child psychologist could fix it. Mr. Vance's fortune could buy an entire city, but it could not buy his son a single C. That was when Marissa appeared, the new maid, invisible to everyone else. She stepped into this cold mansion and noticed something no one else had seen. Because once, she had fought the very same silent battle, and in her mind she carried a method, a legacy her late mother had used to save her. Bit by bit, she began to unlock the mystery the world had overlooked, and when the results of the next test were revealed, the great mansion itself fell silent, stunned. Before we dive deeper into this story, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit subscribe. Your support is what drives us to share more powerful stories like this one. Stay with us until the very end. And if this story touches your heart, leave a comment below and share it with someone who needs it. Now, let's begin. It all started with paper, crumpled sheets, scattered in the corners of a room too large, too empty, for a 12-year-old boy. Test papers littered the mahogany desk, each one stamped in red ink, each F, bold and merciless, cutting deeper than any scolding ever could. Leo slumped on the edge of his chair. His fingers clenched a pencil so tightly the knuckles had gone white. His golden hair, once neatly brushed by the nanny, now hung in messy strands across his forehead. He tried once more to copy the words before him, but the letters would not stay still. They twisted, they danced, they slid off the page until they became a tangle of nonsense. Foreign language mocking his helplessness. The mansion around him hummed with the music of wealth. Polished marble floors reflected the light of crystal chandeliers that never went dark. Every small footstep echoed, making Leo feel like an intruder in his own home. The scent of polished wood blended with the expensive cologne of his father, a fragrance of power and suffocation. And in this house, the sharpest thing was not the silver cutlery, but his father's voice. Sterling Vance, a man whose gaze could freeze a boardroom, a man with no time for weakness. Standing at the doorway, he held Leo's test like evidence in a trial. His eyes scanned the scribbles, the numbers, and stopped at the circled F. Useless. This is useless. The words weren't loud, but they echoed through the room, bouncing off the walls, slamming into Leo's chest. The boy did not cry. He was used to this tone, used to the colossal weight of disappointment in his father's eyes, used to the way servants lowered their gaze as he passed, whispering that perhaps this child had not been cut from the same mold as his great father. That night, just beyond the lavish dining room, two maids whispered while setting the table. Another tutor quit. Did you hear? The rich think money can buy a brain. Poor boy. He always looks lost. But when they saw Leo's small shadow on the staircase, they fell silent, pretending to fuss with the silverware. He was used to that too. The silence hurt more than the whispers. His father's solution had already been decided. He had tried everything, the finest tutors, specialists flown in from abroad, prestigious programs filling the shelves. Nothing worked. His patience had run dry. Maybe a boarding school will straighten him out, he muttered coldly into the phone with his assistant. Somewhere, that doesn't tolerate failure. Leo had overheard, standing just beyond the doorframe. and those words struck harder than the click of the assistant's pen. Boarding school. To him, it wasn't a new beginning. It was exile. A place where useless children were sent to be forgotten. That night, Leo sat on his bed, still clutching the crumpled test in his hand. His room, decorated with trophies his father had bought, not ones he had earned, felt unbearably heavy. He stared at the letter fast, though it had been carved into his skin. Quietly, he whispered to himself. Not in anger, not in defiance, just in endless exhaustion. Maybe I really am broken. And in the silence of that vast mansion, something was about to change. A new maid was scheduled to arrive the next morning. She would walk in carrying nothing but a worn-out handbag, and a past she rarely spoke of. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to face the very pain she once carried as a child, and Leo, a boy drowning in shadows, didn't know either. That the first ray of light had already found its way through the polished walls of the mansion. Dawn was coming. Dawn at the Vance estate wasn't like dawn anywhere else. It didn't come with birdsong or the warmth of a new day. It was simply the moment when the chandelier's artificial light surrendered to the natural light of the sun. A cold, orderly transition, like everything else in this house. And on that morning, with the first rays of sunlight, a quiet change arrived. She entered through the staff entrance, a small door hidden behind carefully trimmed hedges, nearly invisible to the outside world. Her name was Marissa Johnson, 32 years old. Dark curls tucked neatly under a plain scarf. A worn leather bag on her shoulder carried her little world. Her shoes were scuffed, her uniform plain. To the other servants long used to the endless cycle of hires and dismissals, she was just another replacement. Another face that would come and go within a month. As she arranged her cleaning supplies in the staff room, two cooks whispered over the clatter of pots and pans. That's the new one. Yeah, she won't last long. The young master will chase her off faster than spoiled milk. They chuckled, shaking their heads. Marissa didn't reply. She'd learned long ago that the loudest voices usually saw the least. She simply set her bottles neatly in place, her hands moving with the discipline of someone taught to respect every task, no matter how small. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to work, to endure. By late afternoon, she was assigned to clean near the study. As she dusted a cold marble statue, she heard a sound, the furious scrape of an eraser across paper, followed by a frustrated groan. That sound. It was too familiar. It pulled her away from her work. She glanced through the crack of the mahogany door, and that's when she saw him, Leo. The boy sat hunched, shoulders tight, golden hair falling over his face as he tried again and again to rewrite a single line from his textbook. Each attempt pressed harder, each ending in angry scribbles. The paper tore at the corners. His small fist was flushed red from gripping the pencil too long. Marissa froze at the threshold. Her chest tightened. A sharp ache, at once foreign and achingly familiar, stirred from deep within memory. She had seen that look before. Eyes wide, begging the page to make sense. Frustration boiling over, curdling into shame. That had been her childhood. In an instant, the grand mansion around her vanished. She wasn't standing on polished marble anymore. She was back in her mother's cramped old kitchen, sitting on a rickety wooden chair, lip bitten bloody because the words on the page danced and mocked her. And she heard her mother's voice, the gentle woman who spent her life stitching her daughter's broken pieces back together. "They don't hate you, sweetheart," her mother would say, tracing letters in the air with her hand. "They just look different through your eyes. We'll figure them out together." The memory burned. Her mother had been gone for years, but her lessons never faded. Marissa drew a slow breath, blinked away the mist in her eyes, and stepped softly into the room. Leo didn't notice her at first. He was too lost in his private war. When he finally looked up, his face braced itself, ready for scolding, for disappointment. Instead, she smiled. Gentle, free of judgment. "You're holding that." "Pencil like it's a sword," she said, her voice low and warm. "No wonder the paper keeps fighting back." Leo blinked, confused. No adult had ever spoken to him like that. They either barked orders or offered hollow comfort. Marissa's words were different. They didn't blame him. It was as if she saw the struggle as a fair fight, him and the page, rather than his personal failure. She said nothing more. She didn't press. She simply bent down, picked up a crumpled sheet from the floor, smoothed it out, and placed it gently on the desk. Then she went back to her dusting, humming an old tune under her breath. Leo watched her go, the tight knot in his brow slowly easing into something else. Curiosity. That night, as the staff gathered in the kitchen, whispers rose again. "Did you see her in the study? Acting like she knows better than the tutors. Pfft, she'll end up like the rest. Just wait." Marissa heard every word. She wasn't shaken. She wasn't here to impress the staff or even the billionaire who signed her paycheck. Life had taught her patience, and patience was all she had to give right now. What she didn't know was that upstairs, Leo carried her words with him into bed like a secret treasure. Lying in the dark, he replayed her voice again and again. No wonder the paper keeps fighting back. It was the first time someone hadn't blamed him. The first time someone suggested the problem wasn't him, but how he approached it. And for the first time in months, Leo drifted into sleep, without the crushing weight of failure pressing on his chest. A tiny crack had formed in the fortress of his loneliness, and the person who made it didn't even know. The change didn't arrive like a storm. It came like a drop of water, then another, steady, patient, falling onto solid stone. It began quietly, almost invisible. One evening, Marissa found Leo again in the study. His head was buried in his arms, the desk lamp casting weary shadows across his face. He didn't notice her. The pencil slipped from his loose fingers, clattering onto the floor. She bent down gently, picked it up, and set it back in front of him. "Have you ever tried listening to the words?" she asked softly, instead of fighting them. Leo looked up, frowning. Listening? The word sounded strange. His tutors only spoke of rules, grammar, memorization. No one had ever said, "Listen." Marissa pulled up a chair beside him. Without asking, she picked up the book and traced a finger slowly beneath a line of text. Carefully, she read it aloud. Her voice wasn't fast or sharp like the others. It was calm, as if she was letting each word breathe. Then, she asked him to repeat it. At first, the letters tangled and slipped out of place. His cheeks flushed hot. He shoved the book away. "See? I can't do it. I'm broken." His voice cracked with frustration. But Marissa didn't flinch. She leaned back, her voice steady and warm. "You're not broken. You just see the world in a different rhythm." My mother used to tell me the same thing. It took me years to believe her. But she was right. Leo stared at her, stunned. Her mother said the same thing? It was a revelation. No one had ever admitted they understood. They only judged from the outside. But Marissa, she was inside, with him. So she tried again. This time, not with words, but with shapes. She drew letters in the air with her finger. She let Leo trace them on the cool wooden desk, the roundness of a B, the curve of an S. She whispered sounds, "buh," "sh," instead of forcing him to spell whole words. She broke down the terrifying wall of language into small, simple bricks, just as her mother had once done for her. And then, it happened. A small moment, carrying the weight of an entire universe. Leo read a whole sentence, a complete sentence. No stumbles, no hesitation. The sun rises in the east. His mouth fell open, then slowly curled into an unbelievable smile. The first real, radiant smile Marissa had ever seen on his face. I did it, he whispered, afraid that saying it too loudly might break the spell. Marissa beamed. She clapped softly, then tapped the page with her finger. See? The words don't hate you. You just needed them to slow down so you could understand. That night, Leo carried the book to bed. Under the glow of the lamp, he read the sentence, again and again. The sun rises in the east. This time, the words stayed still. They weren't enemies anymore. They were new friends. Days turned into weeks. Every afternoon, when the mansion grew quiet, Marissa slipped into the study. It became their secret world, built on chalk and blackboards, whispered sounds and silent victories. They practiced writing letters on the board, feeling the chalk, scrape and squeak. They clapped in rhythm to remember syllables. Of course, there were hard days, tears, crumpled pages, angry fists slamming against the desk. But Marissa never rushed, never scolded. When he broke down, she simply sat beside him in silence, waiting for the storm to pass. It's okay, she would say. Every rain ends. We'll try again when the sun comes out. Meanwhile, whispers spread among the staff. Did you hear? She's teaching the boy herself. A maid teaching the son of a billionaire? Bold, isn't it? She'll be fired the second Mr. Vance finds out. Mark my words. But when Leo spotted Marissa in the hallway, his face lit up. He began waiting for her every afternoon, pencil sharpened, ready for their secret lesson. His handwriting grew steadier, his eyes brighter, the cloud of defeat slowly lifting. Then one morning, Sterling Vance burst into the study, a fresh stack of test papers in hand. He had prepared a speech on failure, but he froze. Instead of torn pages and a son drowning in frustration, he saw Leo bent over his workbook, carefully sounding out each line. And beside him, Marissa watched silently, nodding encouragement. The billionaire's brow furrowed. There was a focus in his son's eyes he had never seen before. He said nothing, just set the new papers down and left. This time, Leo didn't crumble. He glanced at the stack, then turned back to his work. For the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he was winning. And Marissa, she knew this was only the beginning. The stone had begun to crack, the drops were still falling. The test day arrived quietly. No polished tutors in tailored suits, no expensive experts pacing the halls with briefcases, whispering complicated terms. Only a boy, a sharpened pencil, and lessons whispered by a woman the world never believed could make a difference. Leo sat down at the desk in the study. That mahogany desk was no longer a battlefield. It was his own ground now. For the first time, his shoulders were steady, his back straight. His eyes didn't drop to the floor. They held firm on the page. At the doorway stood Marissa, not too close to add pressure, not too far to leave him alone. She was simply there, her presence a silent promise. The way her mother once stood for her years ago. She didn't correct him, didn't whisper answers. She only gave him a single nod, one nod that carried every ounce of faith she had in him. It meant, you can do this. The pencil began to move. No more angry scratches tearing through paper. The strokes were measured, intentional. At times, Leo would pause, close his eyes, and murmur the sounds Marissa had taught him, like summoning a spell. The letters, once enemies, now lined up obediently under his command. When the test was finished, he didn't crumple it. He didn't throw it away. He picked it up carefully, both hands clutching it as though it were a treasure. And then, he walked himself to his father's office. The hallway stretched endlessly before him. His footsteps echoed against marble floors, small but determined. His hand trembled. But his head, higher than it had been in years. The office door opened. Sterling Vance sat behind a massive desk, mountains of contracts towering around him. He looked up, annoyed at the interruption. He took the paper from Leo's hand, barely. glancing at it, still half occupied with $1 million deal. He expected the familiar letter, the one that had haunted every test. An F, another excuse to justify sending his son away. But then, his eyes stopped. They froze on the number at the top of the page. His brow furrowed. He flipped through the test, line after line, answer after answer. Impossible. There had to be a mistake. An A, not a pity grade, not a teacher's mercy, a clear, undeniable A, circled in red ink. The very ink Leo once feared, now shining like a medal of honor. For a long moment, Sterling Vance just sat there, staring at the paper as if it had betrayed every conviction he'd ever held. That fragile sheet carried more weight than all the contracts stacked on his desk. Leo stood silent. His heart pounded against his ribs. He waited for the sigh of disappointment, for the cutting remark, but it never came. Instead, his father's head snapped up. For the first time, the sharpness in his eyes wasn't disappointment, it was shock. How? Just one word, but it held everything. How could a useless boy achieve this? How could all his money, his experts, his pressure fail, while this result stood before him? Leo didn't answer. He simply turned his gaze toward the door, toward Marissa. She stood there quietly, rag still in hand. She had meant to leave, to give father and son their moment. But Leo's eyes had called her back. Sterling followed his son's gaze, and for the first time, he saw her, not as a maid, not as a shadow in uniform, not as a name on a payroll. He saw her as the one who had done the impossible. The billionaire leaned back in his leather chair, the paper trembling in his grip. Silence filled the office, heavier than any tense negotiation. The only sound was Leo's breathing, small, steady, unshakable. Words spread faster than wildfire. In the kitchen, whispers carried awe instead of doubt. "Di, you hear? The young master got an A." "No way. That Maid, she actually did it. She did what none of those high-priced experts could." My God. Marissa didn't celebrate. She simply returned to polishing the silver, her face calm. But inside her chest, warmth rose, something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Pride that her mother's lesson lived on, that a method born from patience and love had bloomed in the coldest of castles. The silence in Mr. Vance's office wasn't the silence of failure. It was the silence of a worldview collapsing, ready to be rebuilt from the ground up. The test paper with the A lay on the desk, no longer just an exam, but a declaration. That evening, Mr. Vance summoned Marissa into the study. Not his office of power, but the very sanctuary where the miracle had happened. Marissa entered, bracing herself for anything. She was ready to be scolded, for overstepping, for daring to teach his son without permission. But instead, Mr. Vance gestured toward the paper, placed carefully in the center of the desk. The warm light shone on the letter A, making it glow. "You saved him," he said, his voice low, almost reluctant, as if admitting it cost him something. "Not the tutors, not the programs, you." He looked her in the eye, not with the condescension of a master, but with genuine respect. "Name your salary, and starting tomorrow, you won't be scrubbing floors. You'll be his tutor." Marissa's throat tightened. She gave a single, steady nod. But as she turned to leave, her eyes stung with tears. Not the tears of resentment, but of recognition, of joy, in seeing the seed her mother had planted bloom into something she had never dared to hope for. Weeks turned into months. The red Fs faded into distant memory. Now, Leo's report card gleamed with A's and B's. At school, teachers whispered in the staff room, "Is this really Vance's kid? The boy who used to fail everything? He's brilliant. Nobody understood him before. He just needed someone willing to meet him where he was, instead of forcing him to catch up." At home, the mansion felt different. Laughter began to echo through halls once filled only with hurried footsteps and weary sighs. Leo no longer hid his tests under his bed. He pinned them proudly on the massive refrigerator door. even the ones with C's, because now he knew progress mattered. More than perfection. And Sterling Vance, the billionaire who thought he had everything, finally learned a lesson money had never taught him. Talent doesn't grow under pressure, it blooms under patience. Sometimes he would stand at a distance, watching Marissa and Leo laugh together over books. And in his eyes, the hardness melted, replaced by a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Marissa stayed by Leo's side, not as a maid, but as a guide, a friend. To him, she wasn't just the one who taught him to read. She was living proof that those the world overlooks often carry the greatest miracles. She was the reminder that he was never broken. He had only been waiting for someone patient enough to read the language of his soul. If this story touched you, remember, sometimes the greatest power isn't found in wealth or status. It's found in patience, in compassion, in seeing potential where others only see failure. So tell us in the comments, was there someone who believed in you when no one else did? And don't forget to subscribe. Because tomorrow we'll be back with another story, a story that will stay with you long after it ends. Thank you for listening.